They told us it would be paradise. When Emma and I bought the ranch, 40 acres of wild, open land tucked against the foothills, it felt like a dream come true. We were tired of the city, tired of the noise, the neighbors, the constant feeling that you were being watched, judged. Out here, it was different. Out here, it was supposed to be ours. We didn't realize, not until it was too late, that even out in the wilderness, you could still be chained. It started small. A polite letter in the mailbox from something called the Clearwater Meadows Homeowners Association. I laughed when I read it aloud to Emma. We didn't buy into an HOA, I said, tossing it onto the kitchen table. That's for those little cookie-cutter suburbs, not people out here. Emma frowned. It says, we automatically joined when we purchased.
Look.
She pointed to a line buried in the paperwork. Some tiny legal footnote we'd missed in the 100 pages of contracts and disclosures. A buried clause that linked our land, our freedom, to a private association run by a man named Richard Kane. I shrugged it off. How bad could it be? At first, it was nothing. A few notices about trash pickup schedules, recommendations for fencing colors. Stuff we ignored. Then came the first fine. $250 for unsightly equipment left visible from the road. It was an old tractor, half covered under a tarp, way out back near the tree line. You could barely see it unless you squinted. I called the number on the notice. Got a cheerful woman who explained that all visible machinery must be stored out of sight per HOA code. We appreciate your understanding, Mr. Mallory. Compliance maintains community values. Community values. We were a 10-minute drive from the nearest paved road.
What community?
I refused to pay. Principal more than the money. A week later, the fine doubled. Then tripled. Then a man in a navy blazer showed up at our front gate, smiling too wide. Richard Kane. He was everything I hated in a man, polished, plastic, arrogant. The kind of guy who thought owning a clipboard made him a king. Mr. Mallory, he said, tapping the gate with a polished fingernail. Might we have a word about your ongoing violations?
I don't owe you a damn thing, I said.
His smile tightened. Sir, you signed the contract. We have broad authority to enforce compliance. Failure to correct these violations could result in liens, legal action, even foreclosure. I told him to get off my land. He lingered a moment longer than he should have, just long enough to make it clear this wasn't over. The months that followed were a slow descent into madness. Every week, another violation. Every week, another fine. Sometimes for things that weren't even real. Overgrown vegetation, when I kept the fields trimmed. Unregistered livestock, when we had 2 horses and 3 chickens. Perfectly legal. Then came the sabotage. First, one of the fences was cut. Then tire tracks through the back pasture. Deep, deliberate, ruining the irrigation. One morning, Emma found one of our chickens dead, neck broken, tossed against the barn door like a warning. I installed cameras, hid them well. Caught grainy footage of 2 men in dark clothes near the fence line one night, pulling down the wire. We went to the sheriff. He shrugged. Probably just kids. Not much we can do without clear faces. I handed over the video, anyway. It disappeared into an ongoing investigation that never went anywhere. Emma started sleeping with a pistol in her nightstand. Our daughter, Lila, started jumping every time a car rolled down the distant gravel road. Our ranch was supposed to be our safe haven. Instead, it had become a prison. I tried to fight them the right way. I hired a lawyer, an old rancher's son from 3 towns over who understood property rights better than anyone. He laughed when he saw the HOA's tactics. This is classic, he said. They pressure, fine, harass. They want you to leave, sell cheap. Then one of their buddies swoops in and buys it for pennies. It's a damn land grab. I wanted to take them to court, but it wasn't that easy. The contract we'd signed, the arbitration clauses buried deep in the paperwork, the way Kane had greased the local wheels, it would take years and thousands of dollars to fight them. Time and money we didn't have. Meanwhile, the pressure only got worse. I'd wake up some mornings to find dead fish thrown into our well. Our mailbox smashed in. HOA violation notices duct taped to the front door, like some kind of sick joke. They wanted us to break, to run. But I was raised different. My father taught me that a man stands his ground, that there are some things worth fighting for, even when the odds are stacked high against you. I nailed the notices to the barn wall like hunting trophies. I fixed the fences again and again. I repaired the mailbox with my own 2 hands. And when Kane himself drove by one morning, real slow, rolling down his window to smirk at me, I just tipped my hat and smiled. You'll have to do a lot worse than that, I thought. But deep down, I knew it was only a matter of time before worse came knocking. It was Emma who broke first. Late one night, I found her sitting at the kitchen table, her hands shaking as she gripped a coffee cup. "They're going to hurt us," she whispered. Tears welled in her eyes. "Jack, they're not going to stop. They're going to hurt Lila." I sat down across from her, feeling the full weight of my failure settle on my shoulders. I had underestimated them. I thought bullies could be ignored. I thought good fences and strong words would be enough. I was wrong. I reached across the table, took her hand in mine. "I won't let them," I said. It sounded brave. But in that moment, I realized something terrifying. To keep that promise, I might have to do something I could never take back. The first real blow came on a Tuesday night. I had just finished patching the south fence, again, when Emma burst out of the house, her face white as a sheet, clutching Lila to her chest. "There's someone out back," she whispered. I heard them. They were right up against the window. I grabbed the shotgun from behind the door and stormed outside, heart pounding, but whoever it was had already vanished into the darkness. All I found were fresh boot prints by the window, too large for any of us. Deliberate. Brazen. They weren't even trying to hide it anymore. I checked the camera footage. Nothing. Someone had jammed the signal, high-end equipment, not something kids would have. That night, I barely slept, sitting in the living room with the shotgun across my knees, listening to every creak and groan the house made, watching the tree line like it might come alive. Emma didn't sleep either. Neither did Lila. The fear in my little girl's eyes hurt worse than any fine, any broken fence. This wasn't about rules. This wasn't about violations. This was war. I called the sheriff again the next morning. He sighed before I even finished explaining. "Jack, I told you before. It's your word against theirs. You have any proof someone threatened you? Any names? You think random people are showing up on my land in the middle of the night for fun?" I snapped. He paused. "Look," he said finally. "You start pulling guns on people without cause, you're the one who'll end up in cuffs. Not them." Click. I stared at the dead line for a long time, the taste of betrayal bitter in my mouth. The law wasn't coming. The law had already chosen a side. And it wasn't ours. 2 days later, they made their move. It started with the smell. A thick, acrid stench that drifted through the fields as I came back from the hardware store. For a second, I thought it was the neighbor burning trash. Then I saw the smoke. Dark. Heavy. Rolling up into the evening sky. The barn. I gunned the truck up the driveway, gravel spraying behind me. Emma was already outside, screaming, trying to hose the flames. Lila clung to her legs, sobbing. The barn was gone by the time I reached it, just a roaring inferno of wood and memories. The insurance adjuster came out 2 days later. He looked grim as he walked the charred ruins. "You'll need to file a claim," he said. "But off the record, they're gonna deny it." I blinked at him. "Why?" He scratched the back of his neck. "Violation of HOA fire codes. You didn't have the approved extinguishers inside the structure. Technically, that's noncompliance." He handed me a pamphlet. Clearwater Meadows HOA, Section 47C. I crumpled it in my fist without even looking. They had planned this. Every step. Every angle. That night, sitting in the wreckage, I made a decision. No more lawyers. No more complaints. If they wanted a fight, they'd get one. I took out every camera I had and doubled the coverage. Wired, battery backups, satellite links. I buried steel stakes along the drive. I reinforced the doors and windows. I set up floodlights that would blind a man at 50 yards. And then I sat in the dark, loaded guns within reach, and waited. Emma was terrified. "You're scaring Lila," she said quietly, watching me clean the rifle one evening. "You're scaring me." "I'm protecting you," I said. "They won't stop unless we make them." She stared at me for a long time. "This isn't who you are, Jack." I didn't have the heart to tell her that's exactly who I was, who I had always been deep down. A man who believed some lines should never be crossed. And that once they were, there was no turning back. The final warning came wrapped in red tape. Literally. A strip of blood-red caution tape tied to our mailbox post. No letter, no notice, no explanation. Just a message. "Get out. Or else." It fluttered in the cold autumn wind as I stared at it, a sick feeling twisting in my gut. When I yanked it down, I noticed the scratch marks on the mailbox underneath. Deep gouges, like someone had raked a knife along the metal. Not vandalism. Marking. Emma stayed inside all day after that. She barely ate. Lila started sleeping between us, too afraid to be alone in her room. We were prisoners in our own home. And somewhere out there, Richard Kane was laughing. That night, I stood out on the porch, shotgun resting against my leg, staring into the trees. I didn't know when they'd come, only that they would. It wasn't about winning anymore. It was about surviving. The night they came was colder than any I'd felt in years. A dry, snapping cold, like the earth itself was holding its breath. Even the crickets were silent. I sat by the window, shotgun across my lap, eyes fixed on the dirt road winding toward our ranch. Emma and Lila were upstairs, locked in the bedroom with the dresser wedged against the door. The cameras blinked steadily. The floodlights were armed. I had done everything I could think of. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't be enough. When evil wants in, it finds a way. It was just after midnight when I heard the engine. A low growl, crawling slow along the gravel, headlights off. I leaned forward, heart hammering. 3 sets of tires. 3 vehicles. They stopped just past the front gate. For a moment, everything was still. Then the gates creaked open. Not kicked in. Unlocked. I cursed under my breath. Someone had sabotaged the chain earlier. Filed it down so it snapped clean when pulled. They were planning this for weeks. I gripped the shotgun tighter and waited. The first figure emerged from the dark. Tall, broad shoulders, heavy boots thudding against the dirt. Then 2 more. All armed, pistols, crowbars, a machete glinting in the moonlight. Richard Kane led them. Smug as ever, like this was just another meeting, another fine to issue. Except this time, they weren't here to hand out notices. They were here to finish what they started. I flipped the floodlights on. The yard exploded in harsh, blinding white. The men flinched, covering their faces, but Kane just stood there, staring straight at me through the glass, grinning. Then he shouted, "Laws can't save you tonight, Jack. You've been warned. Time to leave, one way or another." I raised the shotgun, visible through the window. "You come any closer, and I swear to God I'll defend my family," I called back. Kane laughed. Full, deep, cruel. "You think anyone's gonna care about a dead trespasser in a town like this? Sheriff's on our side. Whole damn county's on our side." Behind him, one of the cronies, a weaselly-looking man I recognized from past harassment, swung a crowbar at the security camera. The feed went black. Then the lights. A sudden crackling sound, and every floodlight around the house died. Generators. They sabotaged the damn generators. Darkness swallowed us whole. I moved quickly, bolted the front door, shoved a heavy oak dresser against it, grabbed the spare revolver from under the couch, and shoved it into my waistband. Then I crept upstairs, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Emma and Lila huddled together in the corner of the bedroom. Emma's eyes were wide, frantic. "Jack," she whispered. "Stay quiet," I said, pressing a kiss to Lila's forehead. Downstairs, I heard glass shatter. They were in. Footsteps. Heavy. Deliberate. They weren't searching. They knew exactly where to go. Up the stairs. Straight for us. The hallway groaned under their weight. I aimed the shotgun at the doorway, finger tight on the trigger. The first shadow appeared, a hulking mass in the dim light, crowbar raised. I didn't hesitate.
Boom.
The shotgun roared like thunder, deafening in the narrow space. The figure crumpled backward, screaming, clutching his side. The others shouted rage, panic, but they didn't retreat.
They charged.
The door splintered under a boot. I fired again, catching the second man in the shoulder. He spun and crashed against the wall, leaving a smear of blood as he slid down. Kane pushed past the fallen bodies. He wasn't armed with a gun, just a heavy iron bar, but the look in his eyes was enough. Murderous. Deranged. He locked eyes with me and smiled. "You're done, Jack." He lunged. I fired. The blast caught him square in the chest, lifting him off his feet and throwing him back into the hallway. He hit the ground hard and didn't move. Silence.
Thick. Total.
I stood there, breathing hard, the smell of gunpowder and blood thick in the air. Emma sobbed quietly behind me, clutching Lila tight. I waited, listened. No more footsteps. No more shouting. Just the low, wet moans of the wounded. It was over.
For now.
The sirens came later. Someone, maybe a neighbor down the road, maybe one of the wounded men, had called it in. I walked outside, shotgun still in my hands, as the sheriff's cruisers tore up the driveway, red and blue lights flashing across the torn-up yard. They came out, guns drawn. "Drop it," one of them shouted. I placed the shotgun on the ground and raised my hands. In that moment, standing in the cold dirt, hands raised like a criminal on my own land, I realized something deep and ugly. Even now, even after everything, they'd probably try to spin this. Try to make me the villain. Try to bury the truth under paperwork and good old boy politics. But I didn't care. Not anymore.
My family was alive.
We were breathing. And I would do it all again if I had. They arrested me that night. Handcuffed in front of Emma and Lila. Marched into the cruiser like some common thug. But as I sat in that cold metal cage, listening to the static crackle of the radio, I felt a strange kind of peace settle over me. Because for the first time in months, the nightmare was over. One way or another. The first hearing was a circus. News vans lined the courthouse parking lot. Reporters jostled for position at the steps, shouting my name like I was some celebrity criminal. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with whispers, neighbors, officials, even strangers, all packed into the cheap wood benches, waiting for a show. The judge, a thick-necked man with tired eyes, banged the gavel for order. "Jack Mallory," he said, voice heavy. "You stand charged with aggravated assault, manslaughter, and multiple counts of endangering public safety." Emma sat behind me, clutching Lila in her arms, her face pale but determined. I met her eyes, and in that moment, I made a silent vow. I will not let them break us. The prosecutor painted me like a madman. A dangerous loner who overreacted to petty violations. A hothead with delusions of persecution. A violent man who created a dangerous environment for his own family. They barely mentioned the dead animals, the arson, the vandalism. The videos I'd provided, gone. Lost in transfer.
Typical.
But my lawyer, God bless him, stood up and fought like a wolf. He called it what it was: organized harassment. Systematic intimidation. A conspiracy to force us off our land. He dragged up old grievances from other residents who had been pushed out by Kane's HOA machine. He showed photos of the barbed wire sabotage, the trespassing footprints, the red caution tape. He laid it all out for the jury, slow, brutal, undeniable. And when he was done, he turned and pointed at me. Jack Mallory defended his home, his wife, his daughter. If that's a crime, then God help every last one of us. The courtroom was silent. You could hear the old wood groan under the weight of it. The jury deliberated for 2 days. 2 long, agonizing days where Emma and I stayed holed up in a dingy motel room, holding each other close, waiting for a verdict that could change our lives forever. Finally, the call came. I stood in front of the judge again, hands clenching and unclenching at my sides, heart trying to punch its way out of my chest. The foreman stood. "We The jury find the defendant not guilty on all counts. The words didn't sink in right away. It was like I was floating, like the ground had disappeared beneath my boots. Emma gasped, a broken little sound, half relief, half tears. Lila clapped her tiny hands against her mother's chest, sensing the shift without understanding it. I was free, but freedom wasn't the same thing as justice. The HOA still existed. Other board members still lurked in the shadows, untouched. The sheriff, the realtors, the politicians who turned blind eyes, they all carried on like nothing had happened. The system protected them.
It always did.
But something had changed, too. The people had seen the truth. Other homeowners, folks who had been too scared to speak before, started coming forward. Lawsuits piled up like cordwood. Federal investigators sniffed around the edges of Clearwater Meadows, digging deeper, asking hard questions. Whispers turned into protests. Protests turned into depositions. Within 6 months, the Clearwater Meadows HOA collapsed under the weight of its own rot. Property seized. Bank accounts frozen. Former board members facing charges. Racketeering, fraud, conspiracy. It wasn't fast. It wasn't easy. But it was happening. And it all started because one man said enough. As for me, we stayed. Everyone told us to sell the ranch, move somewhere fresh, start over. But this was our land. Our blood was in the soil now, the kind you can't wash away with fear or greed. I rebuilt the barn with my own hands, planted new trees around the property line, got new chickens, new horses. Emma laughed again. Lila grew strong and fearless. The land healed, and so did we. One evening, months after it all ended, I stood out on the porch, watching the sun bleed into the hills. Emma came up beside me, sliding her hand into mine. "You think it's really over?" she asked. I looked out over the fields, golden and endless, and listened to the quiet. "No," I said. "Nothing's ever really over. But sometimes you get a little peace before the next storm." She leaned her head against my shoulder. And together, we watched the last light fade, knowing that whatever came next, we were ready.